All right, everyone, it's time to talk about Mike Pence's Senate tie-breaking vote and the Planned Parenthood slash family planning sort of stuff. What happened, of course, is Obama, during his tenure, the last couple days actually, I think it was January 18th, if I remember correctly, put in place sort of a rule that states weren't able to take away federal funding from sort of the family planning groups unless they're just involved with like the family planning. Like contraception, states would have the ability before that to prevent federal funding given to the states to go to such things, and abortion certainly was part of this. Now I state this from the position of being pro-choice. I do not have a problem with abortion. I think partial birth abortion, yeah, that's a debate people can have. Otherwise, though, I see this as an individual rights issue. I know some people are trying to cast it as a states' rights issue. They're saying, well, the federal government's giving them this money for this sort of medical apparatus, this sort of private charitable and or sort of nonprofit side of medicine, and so they have a right to dispense it to who they see fit. A lot of people say, and this is increasingly what I hear, people will tell me, yeah, I don't agree with abortion. I don't really think it should be illegal, but I don't want my tax money going to it. And that's really where they come from. I can understand that on one level. But on the other level, do we really need to get the government involved in making healthcare decisions? One of the big problems with Obamacare is that it seems, and in many ways is, like the government is trying to coerce people into certain medical procedures, certain medical markets. You must buy this, you must buy that if you sign up at all, you must have this, this, and this. You need to cover that condition that doesn't even involve you. You're a dude and you're paying for, some sort of surgery for women, something like a cervical cancer screening, something like that. And so that's one of the problems. I just want to get government largely out of this whole thing. If there's going to be a subsidy involved, a federal subsidy given to the states, I don't really care whether the states have the ability to divert those funds away from certain types of medical procedures simply because people in those states have a moral quandary about it. This is federal tax money, and part of that total federal amount is coming from people who don't have a problem with abortion too, which should be about half of the population. The population is broken into the largest segment that doesn't really have a problem with the issue. A similarly large segment that believes, yeah, it should be legal, but there need to be exceptions, and then a relatively small number of moralist individuals, usually on a religious basis, who oppose the very idea of abortion. Now, one problem that polling has when it goes to this issue, one reason why it looks like a slim majority of the U.S. population is against abortion is specifically because they tend to lump those groups together. They lump together people who think it should be absolutely illegal with those who think that it should be legal in the case of rape, incest, blah, 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 sometimes birth defects. In other words, they do believe it should exist. They simply differentiate. They don't believe in like partial birth abortion or something like that, which isn't really a thing. People keep trying to tell me that it is. I've already seen the facts and figures, and I'm not just talking about, oh yeah, I went to some left-wing site, like I'm going to do that anyway. And I looked at their facts and figures. No, my position is largely built on pragmatism anyway, not really a moral argument. There was a time when most of the United States had it illegal, and it didn't stop it from happening. What happened is people would literally, it was sort of the clothes hanger thing, they would puncture their cervix with an old coat hanger so that it would look like they were miscarrying. Then the abortion was legal because it was an emergency procedure. The problem with rescinding women's rights on this token is you simply go back to that level. People with the money will go to Canada. People with a little bit less will go to Mexico. Those that have nothing will literally puncture their own cervixes or take some sort of drug cocktail to induce abortion, in which case you have a lot of dead people. I think that it's cheaper as a society, and I would say, yes, indeed, more moral to simply have abortion. Now, if you want to put certain limitations on that, sort of the abortion on demand argument that's made, that's something the states can bicker over. But as far as telling the states, yes, you can indeed withhold federal funds, they're not just coming from the people in your state that maybe agree with this idea, but they're coming from people in some total liberal enclave too that have no problem with the idea, that they can't give that money out to certain organizations I think that sets a bad precedent. Indeed, if you were to take this to this logical extension, what would happen if people in blue states didn't want to give money to some charitable endeavor that happened to have, some sort of low-level religious connotations or something like that? They could make the same legal argument. It just awaits a court case, because all things considered, those two are likely to be considered even. Some marginally Christian charity, a nonprofit co-opted by some church, might be denied any form of favorable access to any form of funding, regardless of the work that they do. They're like curing kids with leukemia, but because there's a statue of Jesus somewhere on the hospital campus, all of a sudden they get drained of every penny that they have from the federal government, which does happen. Some of these charitable groups are largely run by individuals and organizations that themselves, they can't be strictly religious. They can't be religious endeavors in and of themselves, but they're tied in with them, and they receive federal money. What you're doing by rescinding this, I happen to oppose rescinding this particular Obama-era rule, is you put this back in the limelight. This is bad for Trump, for number one, because a lot of the people, the sort of younger level, conservatives so-called, that voted for him, that are more populist than they are actual conservatives, they will have a problem with this, potentially. It'd be like him going after the gay marriage issue and trying to revive that. It'd be a terrible, terrible idea. This one's a little less unpopular than going after, like, gay rights or something, but it's still a sticky issue. And the GOP right now, by taking this up, is probably shooting itself in the foot a bit. In some of those locations where they've made inroads, like the Rust Belt, but where there isn't that overt sort of Bible Belt religiosity, the sort of flyover state mentality of, the far Midwest, the Deep South, something like that. From a tactical perspective, this is not good for Trump, admittedly. From a moral perspective, I would say morality almost be damned on the issue. It's really an issue of pragmatism. And from the angle of simply liberty, why aren't we extending this to the realm of individual liberty, as opposed to, why aren't you just going to eliminate all federal subsidies of this kind, let states solely handle their medical apparatus themselves, and you wouldn't have this argument? States could decide that. Private institutions could potentially then raise the money, or businesses or individuals could raise the money to fund these organizations within state boundaries. It would be much easier. That would be the fair way to approach it. If you don't want federal money going to such programs that provide contraception or abortion or whatever it happens to be, simply allow it to be handled entirely at the state level and do away with these subsidies and federal monies altogether. Do away with it entirely and let the states handle it. I would have no problem with. It's totally even-handed. Private orders will spring up to supply those things, assuming the states aren't like tyrannizing those same groups. Then the federal government can step in, not with the wallet, not with tax money, but simply through the courts to reaffirm that individuals have certain rights, not just under Roe v. Wade, but in a general and natural sense. I think Mike Pence had no real choice but to do this. I don't know that Trump himself really cares about the issue so much. This might be Mike Pence's first and most important sort of moral action on that token. But I'm not sure that it's a great idea for the GOP to be stepping in this right now. I think now is the time to work on taxes and jobs and the wall, and really avoid sort of these moral side issues. It's like the ISP thing. They shouldn't have bothered taking it up. They shouldn't have bothered reviewing it. They shouldn't have bothered shooting it down. They accomplished nothing. It accomplished absolutely nothing. Other than to raise the specter of violations of the Fourth Amendment. Now, yeah, it's being taken slightly out of context. So too could this. But it becomes a major issue, and it's one that doesn't play into the hands of the Republican Party so easily when it comes to younger voters, when it comes to some of those people who would be Democrats but abandoned them because of fiscal issues. Those people now take a second look at the Democratic Party, honestly, in some of these parts of the country, because it looks like the GOP is relapsing back into sort of the fake religiosity of maybe the Bush era or something like that. That's not the direction the GOP should go in if it wants to really sweep the midterms, suppress the Democrats further, and have a mandate for further reforms even within their own party. It's not the direction that I would have to oppose this, generally speaking. If I were advising the Republican Party on strategy, I would have told them, shelve every moral issue. Anything that doesn't have right now to do with taxes or with job creation and trade deals or with the wall should be completely shelved for the next year or two at the very least. They should put it on a shelf and forget about it, preferably never bother going back to the moral issues unless they're, taking care of removing layers of the drug war to ingratiate themselves further to that upstart movement that can't really right now support the left. The left likes censorship, oppression, big taxes, wants to destroy jobs, post-nationalize everything. They love globalism. That doesn't attract a young crowd. That attracts very few regular people. It attracts a lot of corporate heads, essentially. The Democratic Party's done incalculable damage to itself on those lines. The Republican Party, though, is giving their enemies firepower when they make it look like they're out of touch, when they make it look like they're still concerned with the somewhat tired wedge moral issues of past decades. They would have a full relapse if they went into like gay marriage territory or something like that. If Mike Pence manages to convince Trump that that's a good idea, then I would say to Trump he needs to tender the resignation of his vice president and potentially get somebody else in there to try to do a better job. Now, I'm being totally serious. Kick Mike Pence out if he tries to do that. Let him have this one time, but when there's backlash, Trump should really think about muzzling him, I think, a little bit further, or telling him, don't vote in favor of the moral issues, vote nay next time, and just gloss it over and say, well, now that we've got other things to focus on, look at the economy, people are hurting, we want to do better for the average American. That's what he should trot out, honestly. And the Democrats won't attack him because he avoided a moral issue, so they don't have any firepower on him if he does such a thing. That's about all. Peace out.